Since coming into politics in the 1970s, Narendra Modi has been a controversial figure, albeit successful in reach. He's liberalized India's foreign direct investment policies, opened up foreign investment in several industries, including defense and railways, and scaled back reforms and protections for unions and child labor. Having worked his way to his place in the political landscape, how does the child of grocers, belonging to the other backward class, ascend to the office after years of controversy, opposition, and pushback? How did Prime Minister Modi get to where he is? Welcome to Neapolitan. Today we'll be looking at the 14th and current Prime Minister of India. Working his way to the most powerful position despite opposition and controversial decisions, he's the first Prime Minister born after India's independence, and the second to not belong to the INC. He's won 2 consecutive majorities, and is currently the longest-serving PM from a non-Congress party. From Vagnagar to New Delhi, Modi has grown in power and status, liberalizing the country and navigating unprecedentedly through the modern world. We're going to take a dive into where he's from, how he got here, and look at the man he is today. We'll be looking at it broken down into 3 unique sections, like Neapolitan Ice Cream, the vanilla, the who, what, where, and one of the folks that changed the world, chocolate, that flavor punch. Controversy and adversity make lives so interesting. And the strawberry, the lasting legacy and lick that all Neapolitan lives come with. If you're interested in other videos like this, or different in-depth looks at essential people throughout history, then make sure you're subscribed to the channel with post notifications on, so you never miss a single one. Without further ado, let's get into it. Vanilla. Born September 17, 1950, to a family of grocers, Narendra Damodaras Modi was the third of 6 children, born to Damodaras Mulchan Modi and Hiraben Modi. They belonged to the Modganchi Tele community, categorized as the other backward class in the Indian government. Modi has infrequently spoken of his family during his 13 years as Chief Minister of Gujarat. Attention would regularly be called to his lower-ranking social origins. Growing up, he would work in his father's tea shop, Vagnagar railway station platform. He completed his higher secondary education in Vagnagar in 1967. Teachers often described him as an average student, but a keen and gifted debater interested in theater. In particular, Modi enjoyed playing larger-than-life characters in theatrical productions, which has played a part in his overall political image. At just 8 years old, Modi was introduced to the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh and began attending local training sessions. This was an Indian right-wing, Hindu nationalist, paramilitary volunteer organization. This is where he met Lakshman Rao in Namdar, who inducted him as a junior cadet in the RSS and would become his political mentor. He also met Vasant Gajendra Gadkar and Nathalal Jagda and Bharataya Jana Sangh, all of which in 1980 were founding members of the BJP in Gujarat. As was the tradition in Narendra's caste, his family arranged a betrothal to a girl, Jashodebid Shimalong Modi, which led to a marriage when she was 17 and him 18. However, he soon abandoned his bride and left home. He didn't divorce her, but the marriage remained unmentioned for many decades. Shortly before the national election swept him into power, Modi affirmed publicly that he was married and that she was his wife, but the two remained married and estranged. Modi spent the next 2 years traveling across northern and northeastern India. However, in large part, few details have arisen from these times. Since he's described visiting Hindu ashrams founded in Swami Vivekananda, the Belur Math near Kolkata, then the Advaita Ashrama in Almora, and finally the Ramakrishna Mission in Rajkot, he reportedly only remained for a short time since he lacked the necessary college education. Vivekananda has been described as a significant influence in Modi's life. Sometime between 1969 and 1970, Modi returned to Vagnagar for a brief visit before leaving for Ahmedabad. He lived with his uncle working in his canteen at the Gujarat State Road Transport Corporation. Modi's first known political activity was as an adult in 1971. This was when Modi joined the cause to enlist for battle during the Bangladesh Libertarian War. The Indira Gandhi-led government disallowed open support for Mukti Bahini and Modi was put in Tihar jail for a short time. Then upon release, after the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, he stopped his work for his uncle. He began full-time campaigning for the RSS, working beneath an Amdar. He took part in a self-reported non-violent protest against the Indian government and was arrested for his supposed involvement. In 1978, Modi received his bachelor's degree in political science from the School of Open Learning at the University of Delhi. 5 years in 1983, he received a Master of Arts degree in political science from Gujarat University as an external distance learning student. However, when responding to an RTI query, the SOL had no record of students receiving a bachelor's degree in 1978. A professor of political science at Gujarat University claimed the students listed in Modi's MA were not at the time offered by the university. This has caused lasting controversy and questions surrounding his educational qualifications. In 1975, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi declared a state of emergency in India, which lasted until 1977, well known as the period known as the Emergency. During this time, they saw many political opponents jailed and groups banned. Modi was later appointed General Secretary of the Gujarat Lok Sangharsh Samiti Committee, working to coordinate opposition to the emergency in Gujarat. It was shortly banned after that, where Modi was forced to go underground in Gujarat, as shortly after the RSS was banned. He traveled in disguise to avoid arrest. He wrote a book in Gujarat, In the Struggles of Gujarat, which described the events during the emergency. In RSS Sambhag Pracharak, to which he was appointed in 1978, he oversaw RSS activities in Surat and Vadodara. Then, in 1978, he worked in Delhi and began research on the RSS version of the history of the emergency. Back in Gujarat a short while later, in 1987, Modi helped organize the BJP's campaign in the Ahmedabad municipal election, which was won comfortably. Modi's planning has been long described as the reason for this result. Modi's work in Ahmedabad led to his selection for the organizing secretary for the BJP's Gujarat unit in 1987. He joined several other RSS members in important positions within the BJP. Modi began to rise within the party and was later named a BJP's National Election Committee member in 1990. He helped organize the LK Advani's 1990, Ram Rath Yatra 1990, and Murli Manohar Joshi's 1991-1992 Aktra Yatra. However, in 1992, he took a break from politics to establish a school in Ahmedabad. Shankar Singh Vaghela, a BJP MP from Gujarat, played a part in his choice, as the two had unresolved tension. He returned to politics in 1994 at the insistence of Advani. He helped as party secretary guide BJP to victory in 1995. He was later appointed BJP National Secretary and transferred to New Delhi. Here he assumed responsibility for party activities in Haryana and Himachal Pradesh. Modi was sworn in as Chief Minister of Gujarat in 2002, after Keshubhai Patel's health began to fall, along with his damaged reputation in the wake of the Bhuj earthquake. He entered the Gujarat State Legislature on February 24, 2002, by winning a by-election to the Rajkot 2 constituency, defeating the INC by 14,728 votes. Chocolate. In February 2002, a train with several hundred passengers burned near Godhra, killing around 60 people. It carried many Hindu pilgrims returning from Ayodhya. After returning from a ceremony at the site of the demolished Babri Masjid, Modi declared instead a terrorist attack planned and orchestrated by local Muslims in a public statement. Riots began after Vishwa Hindu Parishad called for a band, and anti-Muslim violence spread against Gujarat. The government moved the bodies of the train victims from Gadra to Ahmedabad, which further added fuel to the violence. Later, the state government said 790 Muslims and 254 Hindus were killed. However, the independent sources put death tolls at over 2,000, with a vast majority Muslims, and many were driven in response to refugee camps. The government body of Gujarat itself is generally considered to have been complicit in the riots, some blaming Modi explicitly. He has since received heavy criticism for this situation handling. Scholars describe the violence as a pogrom, a violent act incited to massacre or expel ethnic or religious groups. In contrast, others see it as an example of state terrorism. Modi's involvement in the 2002 events continue to be debated. During the riots, Modi claimed that it was a chain of action and reaction, and would later claim he regretted how he handled the media in regards to it. In the wake of the violence, widespread calls came for Modi's resignation as chief minister. Modi submitted his resignation at the 2002 BJP National Executive meeting in April. However, it was not accepted. Despite opposition from the election commissioner, claiming several voters were displaced, Modi succeeded and advanced in the election in December 2002, where BJP won 172 of 182 seats. Modi would later deny it, but used anti-Muslim rhetoric during his campaign, and the BJP profited from religious polarization in the campaign. During his second term, the rhetoric shifted from Hindutva to Gujarat's economic development. The BKS staged a farmers' demonstration. Modi ordered their eviction from state-provided housing, and later moved to demolish 200 illegal temples, which deepened the rift among groups. Modi retained connections with some Hindu nationalists, as Sangh groups were no longer consulted or informed in advance of the administrative decisions Modi made. His relationship with Muslims deteriorated, and Modi was distanced from the Prime Minister, who had previously called Modi for tolerance after the violence in 2002. After the elections, Vajpayee would later call the violence in Gujarat a reason for BJP's electoral defeat. They claimed, in retrospect, it had been a mistake leaving Modi in office. Modi was named the prime ministerial candidate for the BJP in September 2003, ahead of the 2014 elections. Several leaders expressed oppositions to the candidacy. Modi, however, played a dominant role in the BJP's election campaign. Many stated that if Modi had not played a part as the candidate, they would have voted differently. This was in stark contrast to usual patterns, as the focus on Modi as an individual was not typical for a BJP election campaign. Before the election, Modi's image had centered around his 2002 Gujarat riot role. Still, the shift focused more on his neoliberal ideology and the Gujarat development model. The BJP's campaign was widely assisted by his influence in the media. Modi's blitz cost him around $660 million, which used the optics of social media extensively. After the Bharatiya Janata Party-led National Democratic Alliance won a landslide in the 2014 election, Narendra Modi was later sworn in as Prime Minister. Modi became the first Prime Minister born after India's independence from the British Empire in 1947. In December 2020, Modi became the fourth longest-serving Prime Minister of India and the longest-serving non-Congress Prime Minister. His first year as PM saw a significant centralization of power relative to the previous administration, which had been linked to an increase in senior officials resigning their positions. Modi abolished the Planning Commission in December 2014. It was later replaced with the National Institution for Transforming India. It had the effect of centralizing the power previously with the Planning Commission in the person of the Prime Minister. The commission, in particular, had received heavy criticism in previous years for creating inefficiency in the government and for not improving social welfare. Under Modi's tenure, it's reported that India has experienced democratic backsliding. They have been cited as systematically attacking nearly all existing mechanisms to hold the political executive to account. Scholars now point to how the Modi's government has used state power to stifle and intimidate critics in the media and academia alike, undermining freedoms of expression and alternative sources of information. These reports call the Modi government an authoritarian conservative government, in large part despite a lack of good opposition. Strawberry. The economic policies of Modi's government focused particularly on privatization and liberalization of the economy, based on a neoliberal framework. Reforms range from allowing more foreign investments, while others that might make it more difficult for union creation and lower workers' rights. He reduced the amount of money spent by the central government on healthcare. He emphasized the role of private organizations instead. In 2018, the Indian government had begun a gradual recovery with a GDP growth of 6.12%. India started making good economic trade in the manufacturing sector. Though high unemployment, an increase in the inflation rate, and budget deficiency, Modi's leadership won the 2019 elections. In 2020, India's first COVID-19 case was detected the same day. It was declared a public health emergency of international concern and went into lockdown within 2 months. They alertly implemented surveillance as early as January 17th, before the first cases were detected officially. This was followed by travel restrictions and advisories made in efforts to repatriate and quarantine Indian nationals coming from abroad. Low testing rates had been a severe drawback. Curfews and lockdowns were imposed, but still, only 6,500 samples had been tested nationwide, and the capacity of daily testing by mid-March was just 1,400. Compared to countries like the UK, Italy, and the US, India was quick to implement strict distancing policies. A curfew was imposed with only 360 active cases to help prevent local transmission. The Prime Minister quickly implemented the world's most extensive lockdowns for 21 days, grounding all flights, halting inter- and intrastate travel, and halting all forms of public transportation. Only essential travel for hospital, pharmacy, and grocery workers were allowed to remain open. Police officials closely monitored adherence to these rules, and social distancing practices, including face masks, were implemented. There were also surveillance and tracing done via drones and apps. These sanctions and lockdowns severely impacted low-income, often migrant workers, and other daily wage earners. With little to no savings and no guidance or financial help from the government, these families suddenly faced food insecurity and hardships that led many to walk hundreds of miles. News across the country of migrants killed in road and train accidents began to make headlines, alongside reports of migrants fleeing quarantine centers due to overcrowding and unhygienic conditions. Despite this, there was a general failure to flatten the curve, resulting in continuation of the lockdown as cases pressed beyond 10,000, which had 2 further extensions. The capacity for triaging and treating suspected cases in India has expanded to 2,033 facilities dedicated to COVID-19. The currently low number of patients may be partly due to the few tests conducted. Despite the strict national lockdown and health measures, cases in India continued to rise. A path to a complete lifting of lockdowns and surveillance remains unclear. Meanwhile, politically, in the 2022 invasion of Ukraine by Russia, India's response has taken a distinctive stance among other major democracies. New Delhi has adopted public neutrality despite its discomfort with Moscow's war. The oddity of this Indian position is explained by New Delhi's perceptions of its interests. This has generally led India to avoid condemning Russia publicly, all comments made more subtly. Modi's government urges respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, and calls for the immediate cessation of violence and hostilities. Currently, India has no plans to institute a new 5-year plan, as they have in the past, opting for a 3-year action plan without outlining schemes or allocations, which is not binding on the government. The pandemic has complicated India's affairs, resulting in a massive economic crisis. Over 100 million people lost their jobs within the first few months. India is looking to return to live safely. If you like this video and want to see more like it, then make sure to leave a like so we know what you think and can continue to bring the kind of videos you want to see. Let us know if you think there was anything we missed or if you'd like to see someone in particular in the future. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the material we've shown or other videos like this. Check out the other videos on this channel for fascinating looks into historical figures like this. Until next time, this has been Neapolitan, and we'll see you around.